Right now, I'm very excited to welcome our next keynote speaker, Gina McCarthy, the first ever National Climate Advisor. Gina's illustrious career has included serving as the 13th administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency and most recently as the CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council. During her tenure at the EPA in the Obama-Biden administration, she spearheaded the Clean Power Plan, which set the first ever national standards for lowering carbon emissions from power plants. And in her new role as the National Climate Advisor, Gina serves as the Chief Advisor to President Biden on domestic climate change matters and leads the similarly titled White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy. So thank you so much for joining us today, Gina. We really appreciate it.
Jason, I'm excited to be here to speak with your forum and all the great participants. So thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you are just about 2 and change weeks into your tenure as the first ever National Climate Advisor. Can you tell us a little bit more about that job, since it is a brand new role?
Well, when you say it's only been a few weeks, it's hard for me to believe that, but it's true because it seems like we've been running very fast. And part of that is because President Biden and Vice President Harris had terrific aspirations for what we can do with this country. And addressing climate change was part of it. You know, they came on board with a bunch of crises, including COVID-19, which I think we all know. We now have a national plan and we're running fast to address that. As a result, we had this terrible economic crisis that followed. And then we have the challenge of the systemic racism in the communities that have been left behind. And those issues are now all intertwined with what do we do with one of the biggest challenges, certainly of any generation, which is the climate crisis. And so the challenge that we faced coming in was we wanted to go fast and we wanted to base it on the strongest plan we could because we know that time is precious here. We just lost 4 years of looking backwards instead of 4 years in which we could have pushed forward with US leadership on climate, which is what this is all about. So Jason, I want to thank ESA for all of the work that they've been doing on the storage front, because frankly, this is all about building the system, the infrastructure we need to succeed on clean energy. Because as President Biden started looking at these crises, he realized a few things and he took action right away. His first was on day one, he took action to return to Paris in recognition that we have to be part of the international effort. And he knew that in order to make that happen, we had to domestically move out quickly and put a stake in the ground about what we're going to do here in our country before we can then go and use the great voice of Senator John Kerry, our Secretary John Kerry. I get confused. He was my senator way before he was my secretary. And now he's the climate envoy. Before he can use his voice internationally, we have to move forward. So day one was not just about rejoining Paris. It was about making sure that we're protecting our monuments and our special places in this country again, that we're actually rejecting projects like Keystone Pipeline, which are not consistent with our hopes and aspirations in this country for clean energy. And also that would start tackling all those rollbacks of the prior administration, which numbered larger than 100. So we did that. And then all of a sudden we were in the midst of, so what are we going to do now? And just a short period after that, we did our climate effort. And basically it was a 3 for executive order. The first executive order was really all about science. It was saying, okay, if we're going to move on climate, it's because science is telling us. So let's embrace climate again. And that is basically bringing climate integrity back to decision making across the government. Then we decided that the president was going to lift up his science advisors again and have another presidential council of advisors on science and technology, because he knows the future isn't here. We have to create it. And to do that, we have to look at innovation and technology. And then we outlined what our plans are domestically. And those plans domestically really are what he likes to call a whole of government approach. which I think is a good name for it, because basically it says, I've got this little stronghold office of the Domestic Climate Policy Group, but we're working basically as orchestra leaders for a very large band. And so that's going to include actions and policies and program reviews and ways of looking at the purchasing power of the federal government to actually invest in the future we want. It's going to bring to life President Biden's plan to actually build this country back better. It is not just going to reverse what we don't like. It's going to set a path forward for a clean energy future, and one that will invest in environmental justice communities again and give them a fair shake at opportunities that have been neglected for so long in those communities. So we're looking at a combination of policies, practices, program reviews, purchasing power, and frankly, just the power of the United States to once again be a leader internationally on climate. And we set out a framework for that, and we're already prepared to look at how we deliver on some of the biggest challenges with which President Biden and Vice President Harris identified in their climate action plan. And it's a really exhausting, wonderful, exhilarating, energizing opportunity. I just wish I had energy storage in my office so that it would last longer than the 16 hours we give every day.
You know, we're working on that, making sure you guys can go 24 hours on the charge. But, you know, you and President Biden have both been talking, as you said, about this climate crisis as presenting an opportunity, right? And building back better. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that and how you see, I mean, you started mentioning a little bit of how you see the federal government might be helping to realize that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that if you look at the President Biden's climate plan, you will see that he put some pretty ambitious goals in there. And two of them in particular, which is to get to clean power by 2035, which ought to be, you know, an opportunity for us to talk about how energy storage becomes a vital component in infrastructure moving forward, which we know it has to be to meet that goal. But also he was looking at net zero by 2050. And we also are moving out in front on clean cars as well. So a lot of things happened right out of the gate to basically capture the promises already made and to make sure we ran out of the gate running. And the reason why it's so important to do that is because that President Biden isn't just moving forward with his response on COVID-19 and his American Rescue Plan to basically get people the kind of resources they need to survive while we get everybody vaccinated and return to some sense of normalcy. But the important thing is that we've been losing millions of jobs. People cannot put food on their table. We have to go beyond the rescue plan and actually think about what is that future we want to build again. And so when you start from scratch, where you need to drive millions of jobs into the economy to get the United States on a more stable economic footing, you ought to be thinking about where you want to go, not where we used to be. So the whole thing is, let's not recreate our fossil fuel-based economy that we know is creating the climate crisis before us. Let's start investing in clean energy. This is the opportunity of our lifetime to basically restart and do that by building the kind of jobs that we want to have, by making sure that they're good paying union jobs. We are going to build every step of the way job growth as a fundamental principle, as well as delivering environmental justice, which has been too far on the sidelines to be an effective strategy for too long. And it's time that we invested in those communities that need investment the most. So we're going to talk about jobs. We're going to talk about health benefits today. We're going to talk about real things that you're doing. And in order to make that future happen today, we're going to talk about infrastructure investments. Building back better means building. And that means we're going to build stuff like 500,000 new charging stations for electric vehicles. And we're already seeing the car companies sit up and go, oh, so that's where we need to go? Yeah, that's where we need to go. And so it's an exciting time, I think, for all of us to use the tools that we have to really position the United States to get out of the pandemic and on a much more solid footing, and really do it in a way that lets young people who have been so active in these issues know that we've heard them, we get it. It's not about the future of me, it's about their future, and how do we build it and deliver it for the American people. That's what this is all about.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly the energy storage industry and ESA see immense opportunity in this as well. And, my thesis here is that we are entering the charging 20s, right? Where the role of energy storage is actually going to be increasingly central to decarbonization and perhaps has a role to play in environmental justice. How do you understand the role of storage technologies in decarbonization, environmental justice in your work? What is getting you most excited about storage?
Well, I think that I'm excited about it because I think the technology is there. There's a lot that we can already do. I think the trick is to both continue with innovation, and this probably goes across the board for all clean energy that we're working on, is we already have so much we can deploy. And that's what I think storage needs, is a real deployment strategy. Because we don't need to sit around and say, how do we get to the next generation when I can already unveil the future generation? And so the challenge that we face, I think, is that when people say, renewable energy, they think, oh, the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun. I mean, how many times have we heard these things? We have to explain to the general public that we have answers to this. We have storage capacity that makes sure that when we generate energy, we can hold it and release it at the times when we need it. It has to be built in with the same kind of thought process and framework that we do for energy generation. We think a lot about building the grid systems and how to make them work. We now have to recognize that storage needs to be a central component of that strategic thinking. We can deploy it now. And there are strategies that we can bring to the table in a Build Back Better platform that bring us an ability to grow energy storage in the way that it becomes a much more central component rather than part of a hybrid direct system. We need storage, grid storage, in a way that is profoundly more energized than it has been before.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're obviously preaching to the choir a little bit on there. Perhaps as the last question before we run out of time, do you see also part of your work in both climate mitigation and climate adaptation? Certainly folks in the storage industry see us as a part of the resilience discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think resilience is too often seen as a secondary consideration when it really needs to move into a primary consideration. Look, we have to get the middle of the country understanding and active on climate. We need to show them what resilience looks like. We need to build it into the system so there's confidence, not just that they can embrace the challenge of the climate crisis, but we can stand up and say that the United States can make this happen. We are right now seeding a lot of the biggest opportunities to China and other countries. When we have to bring manufacturing back to us, we need to bring opportunities to build resilience into the system. And if storage isn't part of the resilience in our energy generation system, and storage isn't part of how we design from out of the gate, then we're all just going to be retrofitting our way in. And that is not efficient, it's not economic, it's not going to send the right job signals to folks that need a job now with good pay, good union access. So we have to, I think, be smarter than we were before and outline the fact that we have solutions now. The question for the whole of government approach is how we invest in them as a federal government, how we deploy what already exists, how we move from the coastlines to the engagement in every state in the middle, so they can see not just that climate change is real and the crisis is upon us, but we have solutions. Let's celebrate them. Let's spend money on them. Let's grow this clean energy future that we all talk about, and let's do it now.
Well, we in the industry obviously are across the country and see opportunities in every state. And so we are very much eager to work with you. And certainly ESA stands by as a resource as you and the rest of the White House put together those plans on how to bring the federal levers on driving forward energy storage for decarbonization and resilience. Thank you so much, Gina, for joining us. We're looking forward to working with you.
Well, Jason, let's continue the conversation because I'd like to understand the challenges you're facing and the way we can work across the whole of government to alleviate those challenges and make sure that we're building the kind of partnership that you and I are going to be proud of.
Amen.
2, 1.
That was really fun. It's a testament to this industry's rising prominence to have senior White House officials taking the time to speak to us. Certainly, one of the roles ESA plays, of course, is in making sure our members' perspectives inform federal officials. In addition to our advocacy work, we also do try to assist the administration with industry convenings and other educational matters. For example, at our annual conference and expo last year, ESA Con, Department of Energy's leading staff convened with industry members to provide input on the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. This is an enormous opportunity when you join ESA. So those of you who are in the storage industry and not already members, I encourage you, please reach out and become a member today.